Welcome back. I'm Natasha Elkington, your host for the last day of the Global Landscapes Forum. And I'm here with Lade Araba, who's the Africa representative from Convergence Finance.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely. So could you tell us a bit more about how you're involved in landscape restoration?
Sure. I'll just tell you very quickly about Convergence. We are the global network for blended finance. We generate data, intelligence, and deal flow to mobilize private capital to developing countries. And our participation is in pretty much every sector. So we are facilitating capital raises for projects, for companies, for funds, for anything that is related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And obviously that's why we're here at the Global Landscapes Forum. One of the things that we do is to support the design of innovative blended finance structures that can ultimately raise commercial investment at scale. So we gave a grant to ADM Capital and the ADM Capital Foundation to help design the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility that currently operates in Indonesia. Of the 15 grantees, that we have given $5 million over the last 2 years, they have subsequently been able to mobilize $220 million in financing. So blended finance creates leverage.
Great, wonderful. So would you like to give us some of the highlights that you've been involved in the plenary?
Absolutely. So I think, we talked about some of the challenges or bottlenecks that are impeding the flow of capital towards sustainable landscapes projects in Africa. And just very quickly, the ones that I highlighted for the purpose of the discussion, one was the fact that we don't have as many bankable projects as we need. So projects need to be well structured, they need to speak to environmental sustainability, but then they also need to be commercially viable. So providing, attractive risk-adjusted returns. Two is, with sustainable landscapes projects, you're talking about managing tropical forests and other landscapes. These are projects that typically have a long lead time, whereas investors have short-term horizons. So there's a mismatch. There's also a mismatch in terms of ticket sizes, as well as maturities, and just the overall risk-return profile. Another challenge is we're not seeing the level of collaboration, coordination, and partnership that we should have between government, civil society, and also private investors. They all need to, come together and, make this work. And then the final challenge that I see is, within the African context is land rights. If you don't have access to the land, then you can't really make decisions on how land is utilized in a sustainable manner.
Great. So what are some of the ways to help Africa overcome the challenge of coordination, for example?
One of the suggestions that I made in the plenary was, utilizing the platform of the Global Landscapes Forum to bring together the various stakeholders. So not just policymakers, not just, advisors, but also the deal sponsors. So people who do have projects that ultimately would benefit from some advising around the structuring, and also access to finance. So the financiers, the lenders, the investors, they should also be a part of this forum. If everybody's included, then it's a lot easier to move the needle to where we want it to go. And if I could just add one more thing about blended finance, that's basically what Convergence focuses on. And blended finance is very simply a financial structuring approach that leverages development finance from the public sector, so donor agencies, DFIs, but also grant funding from philanthropic sources to serve as risk capital that de-risks transactions and makes them more viable so that, private investors come in. So if you think about sustainable landscapes projects, blended finance is one approach that can be utilized to de-risk those transactions so that ultimately they can attract commercial investment.
Great. So what are the two messages that you want the audience to take away from everything that you've learned and you want them to know? That's important.
So I think, if you remember nothing else, remember these two things. One is, landscapes and basically the resources that come along with that are assets. So think about how to monetize the economic value of these assets. And related to that is what revenue models or business models can you apply to generate cash flows? Ecotourism, agriculture, so producing and selling commodities, even going to the extent of trading carbon credits. There are various ways in which you can build profitable and viable businesses that ultimately, can generate the cash flows, and it's a lot easier to raise financing if you have a viable business model.
Right. Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.